As most of you know, I'm voting for Donald Trump in November. I've said so many, many times at this point. But I'm not just voting for Donald Trump. Next week, I will be co-hosting a fundraiser for him. Now, this may come as a surprise to some of you. I want to tell you why. As you know, I didn't support Trump in the primaries. I don't endorse candidates in Republican primaries, but I do tell you who I would have voted for. And I told you I would have voted for Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida if given the choice. But Ron DeSantis isn't the nominee. Donald Trump is the nominee. And he's facing Joe Biden, who is the worst president of my lifetime. Because Donald Trump is the nominee against Joe Biden, I won't just vote for him. I will walk over broken glass to vote for him. Actually, I will go into my own pocket to support him, which is what I'm doing. My calculus is really simple. America was better off under Donald Trump than it is under Joe Biden. At home, America was safer and more prosperous. When Donald Trump was president, we did not have an open border. We were not flooding our country with at least 7 million illegal immigrants, overwhelming our cities, leaving our country wide open to the plague of Chinese and Mexican drug cartel-backed fentanyl poisoning. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have a president who tried to use the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to force 80 million Americans to take a vaccine or lose their jobs. And my company didn't have to sue to stop it. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have 40-year highs in inflation and decreasing real wages. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have a federal attempt to teach children that boys can be girls and vice versa, or to force taxpayers to subsidize abortion, or to target religious institutions for the great crime of upholding traditional Judeo-Christian values. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have an administration hell-bent on stymieing the police in their attempts to fight crime, or an administration that values diversity and inclusion and wokeness above military readiness, all in the name of equity. When Donald Trump was president, we did not have American businesses preparing to have their incomes robbed from them in the name of the biggest spending programs in American history. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have unconstitutional attempts to simply wipe away student loan debt, or a Department of Justice dedicated to the targeting of political opposition. When Donald Trump was president, the world was not on fire. When Donald Trump was president, we did not cut and run in the face of 8th century barbarians in Afghanistan who blew up 13 American soldiers, hunted down our allies, and reestablished al-Qaeda bases. When Donald Trump was president, peace was breaking out in the Middle East between Arab nations and Israel, and Iran was in a box. We certainly did not have a multi-front hot war between Iranian proxies and American allies, or American soldiers directly, and we weren't trying to pay billions in bribes to the Iranian mullahs. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have a war in Ukraine. When Donald Trump was president, we didn't have China threatening imminent blockade of Taiwan. When Donald Trump was president, America was better off. Now, as I've said, I will always be honest with you about Donald Trump. He was not my first choice in the primaries. He's a deeply flawed human. I've been open in my criticisms of Trump on both character and policy, and I'm not going to stop criticizing Donald Trump when I disagree with him. I always will be honest about that, and I always will. That's my job. It's the job of all Americans, because Donald Trump, as a presidential candidate, works for us. But Donald Trump is the man standing between America and a second Joe Biden term. And a second Joe Biden term means America is in dire, dire trouble. It is that simple. I encourage all of you who, like me, would have preferred another nominee for the GOP to recognize this is now a binary race. It is Trump or it is Biden. And unlike in 2016, we don't have to guess at what a Trump administration will be. We also don't have to guess what a Biden administration will be. We know. America cannot afford another term of Joe Biden, or perhaps more realistically, a Kamala Harris term. Joe Biden is here to finish the job Barack Obama started of fundamentally transforming America into the image of the far left. That cannot happen. That's why I'm not just giving Donald Trump my vote, I'm giving him my money, because this election matters. And Donald Trump must be the next president of the United States. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, with inflation on the rise, $20 barely gets you anything these days. In most restaurants, you can't get a burger and fries for under that. How about it like at the gas pump? Well, you might be able to get like a quarter of a gallon or something. I mean, like really, gas is getting very expensive. But from my cell phone company, Pure Talk, you can get unlimited talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $20 a month. Pure Talk gives you the same quality of service as your current cell phone provider, but for half the cost. I want to ensure you heard that. This is top-tier coverage on America's most dependable 5G network for half the cost of other carriers. The average family will save almost $1,000 a year, all with no contracts and no activation fees. You can switch to Pure Talk with the phone and phone number you currently use, or you can take advantage of their great deals on the latest iPhones and Androids. Making the switch is incredibly easy. Their U.S. customer service team can help you join Pure Talk in as little as 10 minutes. Choose to spend your hard-earned money with a wireless company that shares your values, supports our military and veterans, a company that creates American jobs, and refuses to advertise on fake news networks. Don't spend another day spending ridiculous amounts of money on your phone plan. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Right now, my listeners can get an additional 50% off their very first month of coverage. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro. Okay, so just another reason why Donald Trump has to be president of the United States is the Democratic Party's decision to cater to pro-Hamasniks in Dearborn, Michigan. So yesterday, in the biggest news of the day, Chuck Schumer, who's the Senate Majority Leader, pathetically enough, he called on Israel to hold new elections. The reason he is doing this is because Democrats are trying to play an incredibly stupid game right now. They believe that they need to win Michigan in order for Joe Biden to win the presidency. And they believe there are enough Arab American voters who like Hamas in Michigan that if they somehow undercut Israel in its war against Hamas, they will win those Arab votes in Michigan and therefore have a shot at winning the election. Because if they lose Michigan, it's over, by the way. As the map currently stands, if Donald Trump wins both Nevada and Michigan, he wins the presidency. And right now he's leading in Nevada and he's leading in Michigan. By the way, he's also leading in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So they got a bigger problem on their hands than just Michigan. But Democrats are figuring that they might be able to split the baby a little bit. And what they're going to try to do here, and this has been obviously pushed by the Biden administration, and Schumer is just doing their dirty work, they are trying to suggest to Jewish voters who overwhelmingly historically have voted Democrat, not Orthodox voters like me. Orthodox voters vote 70-30, 80-20 for the Republicans. But Jewish voters broadly vote Democrat. The thing that they are trying to do is they're trying to say that the reason that they are distancing themselves from Israel is not because they're somehow anti-Israel or pro-Hamas. The reason they're doing this is because they just don't like Bibi Netanyahu. And what they are counting on is liberal Jews being stupid enough to believe that their opposition to Israeli policy is not about opposition to Israel, it's about opposition to Netanyahu. The reason this makes no sense on any sort of logical level, of course, is that Bibi Netanyahu is currently part of a war cabinet. That war cabinet includes his prime opposition, Benny Gantz, of the opposition party. If the elections were held today, Benny Gantz would be the prime minister. Not only that, Benny Gantz would then do exactly what Bibi Netanyahu is doing. There is zero dissent in Israel right now about whether Israel ought to go into Rafah and finish off Hamas. This is not a matter of controversy in Israel. There is widespread unanimity about exactly what has to happen to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But what the Biden administration has been trying to do is have it both ways. So they want to say to the Dearborn voters, well, sure, we're still providing some support to Israel, but we really hate Bibi Netanyahu. So you got to believe us. We're trying to hold him back. That's us. We're trying to, if it weren't for us, he'd just be going hog wild. And then they want to say to Jewish voters, I mean, sure, we're holding Israel back, but the real reason we're holding Israel back is because we really hate Bibi, and Bibi's so bad. And you liberal Jewish voters, you don't like Bibi either. That's the game that they're playing. So Chuck Schumer tried to play this game yesterday on the floor of the Senate, in which he engaged in something I've never seen an American politician of his rank engage in ever with regard to a foreign ally. Ever. Britain, France, Poland, Spain, like nowhere have I ever seen that. I've never seen a top-level American politician say, with regard to an American ally overseas, that we are calling for new elections in order to oust the current sitting prime minister or president of that country. I've never heard anything like it. It really is remarkable. And that's what Schumer did yesterday. So Schumer gets up there and he blames Netanyahu for the violence, which again is insane. There was no violence in the Gaza Strip from Israel until Hamas decided to cross the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel, slaughter 1,200 people, mass rape women, kill babies, and then take 250 hostages back into the Gaza Strip and not surrender. But here is Schumer, again, trying to go after Netanyahu.
The Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then, and the Israeli people are being stifled right now by a governing vision that is stuck in the past. Nobody expects Prime Minister Netanyahu to do the things that must be done to break the cycle of violence, to preserve Israel's credibility on the world stage, and to work towards a two-state solution. If he were to disavow Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and kick them out of his governing coalition, that would be a real meaningful step forward. But regrettably, there's no reason to believe Prime Minister Netanyahu would do that. He won't disavow Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in their calls for Israelis to drive Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Bank. He won't commit to a military operation in Rafah that prioritizes protecting civilian life. He won't engage responsibly in discussions about a day-after plan for Gaza and a longer-term
Okay, so he's criticizing Netanyahu here. Benny Gantz wouldn't do any of these things either. Benny Gantz is not going to simply suggest that the Palestinian Authority ought to be in charge of the Gaza Strip. What's amazing here is that Schumer is saying, well, Israel needs a new election. Okay, first of all, Israel holds an election like every 5 minutes. Their last election was in November of 2022. And before that, they'd had 5 elections in 4 years. One thing I noticed that Schumer didn't do is call for an election in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank for the Palestinians, who have not held an election since 2005. The reason that he's not calling for an election there is because if there were an election there, Hamas wins. And he knows it. And so does the Biden administration. The last thing they want is democracy in the West Bank or Gaza Strip, because it might actually validate the simple fact that the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip do not want peace with Israel, are hell-bent on destroying the state of Israel, and would elect a government to demonstrate exactly that. So instead, he is pouring ire on Netanyahu's government. Again, it's illogical on just a pure, basic, factual level. It makes no sense. Benny Gantz and the opposition are part of the current government in Israel. The current government in Israel represents, if you include Gantz's party, it represents almost 80 seats in the Knesset out of 120. This makes zero sense. So here is Schumer calling for the replacement of elected officials. Again, I've never seen anything remotely like this in American politics before. The calling on an elected government in a parliamentary system to dissolve itself to please Chuck Schumer or something.
On the Israeli side, the U.S. government should demand that Israel conduct itself with a future two-state solution in mind. We should not be forced into a position of unequivocally supporting the actions of an Israeli government that include bigots who reject the idea of a Palestinian state. Israel is a democracy. 5 months into this conflict, it is clear that Israelis need to take stock of the situation and ask, must we change course? At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel.
You want to talk about imperialism? That's imperialism right there. Israelis are not protesting for a new election. Israelis, by polling data, are not interested in a new election at this very moment. There will be a new election, and Bibi will probably not do well unless somehow Democrats spur him into victory by opposition to him. How do you know that this is so crazy and ridiculous? This is so crazy that Benny Gantz, who is, again, the leader of the opposition, who, if an election were held today, would probably be prime minister of Israel, he came out against Schumer. Benny Gantz said that Schumer was, quote, a friend of Israel who helps us a lot, including recently, but he made a mistake in his speech. Quote, Israel is a strong democracy. Only its citizens will determine its leadership and future. Any external intervention in the matter is incorrect and unacceptable. Right? That, of course, again, that is Bibi's opposition in Israel. What Schumer is doing has nothing to do with the best thing for America or for Israel. It has to do with what's the best thing for Joe Biden in Michigan. That's all this is. As many people have joked before, the two-state solution for Joe Biden is not Israel and a Palestinian state. A two-state solution for Joe Biden is Michigan and Minnesota, both states with heavy Muslim populations. So Schumer later in the day tried to walk it back a little bit. He said the U.S. cannot dictate the outcome of an election. That is for the Israeli public to decide. As a democracy, Israel has the right to choose its own leaders. But the important thing is that Israelis are given a choice. There needs to be a fresh debate about the future. Well, thanks for trying to walk that one back. You literally called for an election in which the United States would effectively cut off support for Israel, depending on whether Israel elected people that you like. And again, the people that Joe Biden supposedly likes would pursue precisely the same policy in Rafah that they're currently pursuing. Benny Gantz is traveling around the state of Israel right now telling people that the operations in Rafah are imminent. It's totally crazy.